Well, welcome everyone. It's good to have you. Thank you for wading through the city pop anime music. And this is DIY mocap with me. The roadmap for today, I'm going to sort of give you an overview of mocap and traditional mocap, which is sort of optical as well as inertial, and sort of the pipeline of those, and as well as pros and cons of each system. And suit. And then I'm going to go talk through bedroom mocap. So that's connect, AR and pose estimation, deepfakes, VR, inverse kinematic rigs for like VR avatars, and then iPhone face, Lipsync, and sort of other methods of doing mocap. And after that, just open discussion, open for questions and some closing remarks. But let's get started. So my mocap background, Deirdre and I were both interns at Activision Central Tech. We did a lot of mocap cleaning. And then I worked on a few projects at USC. And for a little bit, I was trying to get off of the ground, being like a mocap liaison. But then COVID happened. But when I was the liaison for like a few months, I did sort of consult on a lot of projects. But yeah, what is mocap? For those who are kind of confused, motion capture is a technology that is used to digitally record specific movements of the characters, cameras, and objects, mapping that data onto 3D models for animation and virtual production. It's also just think about it as an interface, like a controller, but you control virtual the world with your body, and I think that's kind of amazing. So there is, in terms of optical capture, there's usually a 50-50 setup. That's usually 50-ish markers at least, depending on the rig, markers on the body, and then you have 50 sort of like marker but makeup markers on the face. And they aren't necessarily like read by the system, but they're more there for you as visual references when you're doing face mocap. But yeah, it's and then you essentially move it to OptiTrack, Blade, Shogun, Qualisys. These are the mocap middleware programs that sort of get all this data, put them into point clouds, and sort of triangulate where things are to a really millimeter precision. It's amazing. And then you feed those into Motion Builder, Maya, or Blender, your sort of 3D suite. And then from that point, retarget all of those and then bring them into the game engine. Now, what is retargeting? We'll get into that in a second, but yeah. So, and once it's in the game engine, it goes on to characters and does things like there's different types of animation. There's, I think the one that most people know of is like a state machine. So you have your like idle cycle, and then like a little arrow to another cycle when something else changes. Conditionally wise, you have like trees, but timelines. And then there's root motion, which is characters are driven physically by the animation rather than the scripts. And then motion matching, which is using machine learning to figure out, but based off of the vector of the direction, where the character is going, it'll figure out the best, clip of animation from a huge database, that's appropriate for that spot. And what I think it's really important to talk about what mocap isn't. It's not a replacement for animators. It still requires a lot of work, and it's not plug and play. It isn't a purely artistic process either. It's a technical discipline with a lot of methodology. But one of the main conceptions about mocap is it isn't cheap. But today I hope to change your mind about that. Optical capture. It's using infrared cameras and reflective taped balls with Velcro suits, and basically figuring out where and solving where those would be in space. You do this thing called a ROM, which is creating a range of motion. So you kind of like do all the possible things you could possibly like do with your body, and it'll sort of figure out where what are the limits of your joints. And so there's three different types of optical cameras, I think, that are kind of popular out there. There's OptiTrack, which is what we have at Zemeckis. It's simpler software in terms of just using it. They have really good cameras, and it's what we have at USC. And then there's Vicon, and I think this is like industry standard. It has probably the best solver on the market. And Vicon also has Shogun as well as Blade. So those are pretty industry leading cleaning packages. And then there's Qualysys, which I think is actually the best. But it's mostly used in films. These cameras are actually pretty amazing. They can go outside in really harsh conditions, snow, underwater. They're pretty tight. But yeah, so in terms of this is like as good as you can get, I think, right now in terms of motion capture. It captures literally if it moves, it can capture it. And the only cons is you have to calibrate the stage probably in the morning and afternoon, because if you can see these trusses, these metal beams here, or plastic PVC, but either way, these beams they sort of shift throughout the day based off of the weather. And it sounds kind of crazy, but it is true. Like it all does affect the actual calibration of it. So you have to do multiple wand calibrations, which is basically telling the space where the ground plane is, as well as kind of giving it a sense of where cameras are looking at a thing, and then they'll figure out based off of that point in space where the other cameras are looking at it from, and then sort of figure out like where it's oriented and all that good stuff. But we're not really here to talk about that, so I won't get into it. And then there's inertial suits, IMUs, and essentially those have these little units, and they have accelerometers in them. Essentially, your phone, if it can affect like how fast it's going, in a sense that there's gyroscopes, the orientation of it, and then there's a magnetometer, which sort of figures out where it is in relation to magnetic north. And so it uses all these sensors, and it communicates with all the other units with all the sensors to figure out where they are in relation to themselves, rather than in the space, which is really cool. And I think you can get a lot of good data from this. Although you do get what you pay for, because like let's say you start with the cheapest one size fits all sort of suit, like the perception neuron. I know that we have like a sort of a grad of alumni of USC who works for perception neuron, Ari, and he's really nice. But I will say the suits they have not the best customer service. The only call center, if you check on their website, is China. And the IMUs are really fragile, and the setup is way too fucking long for anyone to really use in any production by themselves. Rococo is really good in terms of just size suits you can put on and just record. They have good customer service, although it is dependent on your Wi-Fi connection. Has some nice tools. It's sort of the mid tier. And then there's X10s, which is amazing. It literally records things that you wouldn't be able to record otherwise with the other suits because of interference due to like magnetic fields. And it's really amazing, but it's also very expensive. It's $12,000 and up for a suit, and then it's like $1,000 a year for the software. But it is the best. That's what a lot of big studios use. And so it is the decent capture. The nice thing about it is you can go capturing outside of a volume. The volume travels with you. But again, for some of the suits that are cheaper, like you can't hold a phone or like a cell phone or anything like a computer, laptop that could actually interfere with the magnetic stuff. Depending on where you're living too, like the floor, like who knows what can interfere. So it's really kind of you might want to do some testing before you actually commit to buying one. And then there's volumetric capture, which is 4D capture. Videogrammetry is also what it's called. There's so many names for what it is, but basically it's real-time photogrammetry using depth cameras, and it's mostly used for holograms. The pros, you don't really need a character rig, but the cons is like no one can afford it. Like right now, this image that you can see here, it's Metastage, and it's probably the best on the market right now, and I've been to it. It's like $1,000, $100,000 to even walk in the door to use this facility, and then it costs like $1,000 per minute, if not more. It is insane. The up costs and the maintenance for this stage. It's it's crazy, but it's really cool if you can get a chance to see it. But and then in terms of things that you could do at home, you could buy like 4 Connects and then figure out how to like sort of like grapevine them, with USB connectors to your computer. And there's actually some great documentation that a friend of mine, Brian Handy, has did for his grad, research. And so it works. It's not great. It looks point cloudy and kind of messy. I wouldn't. It's really hard because you have to be moving a lot of data through these USB ports, which isn't really possible unless you have like a supercomputer. So it's very complicated right now for 4D capture. But the typical pipeline for motion capture is you got to capture the data. Actors come into the studio where the data is recorded, sometimes in-house and from outside vendors. You get a spreadsheet of takes. You just got to go through them, do a process called QA, where you preview the takes before and identify problems, and then you go in and reconstruct it, clean it, which means you're labeling these things called these markers. As you can see with the gray ones, they don't know, this is just a guess of where it's at. You have to kind of tell it where it's at. And then, fill in missing markers, swap, things. Markers sort of go missing when there's occlusion, meaning something is blocking the camera, or like, let's say you have 2 actors hugging each other. That will sort of mean that you can't see their chest markers, which kind of will give a little noise to the data. But so you clean all the data, and then you solve it again, merge that data onto the model, adjusting for different joint lengths, and then modifying the mathematical inputs to refine the performance. And then after that, you send it off to the studio, and sort of your work as a mocap tech ends there. And animators can kind of, offset things more so if they want, or, exaggerate the performance. And, it's really great. I love Motion Builder for that. But that's sort of mocap in a nutshell, typically. But then COVID happened. I lost access to the studio. I lost access to the labs. And I had no idea how I was going to get motions for my projects without resorting to keyframing. So I hit the books, and this is what I found. I found Connect Mocap with Ipisoft and Breckle. I won't really be talking about those because, for one, this talk is to get cheap mocap with things that you already have, not buying new hardware. And to start, to say honestly, like I've tried 3 times on Amazon to buy the PC adapter for Connects, but since it isn't currently manufactured, you have to go through third-party sellers, and usually something's wrong with the battery brick, or something's just wrong with them, and so you have to, it's a whole mess. But you also need a tripod, and at the point once you actually do pay for all of that and get the space and get everything you need, it ends up being like half of the price of actually buying an actual suit, and at that point you might as well get a suit. So we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk more about virtual reality IK avatars, which is kind of what you see here. We're going to talk about 4D capture, in terms of the 4D capture in Google Code, I won't really be mentioning this, but this is a really cool research paper through USC in terms of our ICT lab, and essentially it just with one photo you can get a 3D model, and then you can rig it up pretty easily. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Pose, OpenCV, face tracking, pose estimation from 2D video, and recording tools. I know it's a lot, but let's just let's get started. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So my experimentation started with webcam pose estimation. So I found this machine learning library, and using that system, I retargeted it to my own rigs. Combined it with a recording library I've also found another place, and then created a UI wrapper for use outside of Unity, so that you can just have a quick program to like record some motions based off of your webcam. And it's pretty good, actually. Honestly, there's like some problems with it, but the more data you give it, the better it is. In terms of if you actually use it inside of Unity using their Barracuda machine learning, it's a sort of in preview package for Unity, but I highly recommend toying around with it if you want. But if you don't want to like try to figure out how to do that, then you can just download the program that I kind of this download version of it that I exported for you all. It's right here. I think they're also going to put the links in the chat. but also, if you don't really care for real time, animation, then you could use this online service called Deep Motion. You could just Google that, and essentially you just send in a video from your phone, and then it sort of analyzes it and gives you some decent data. Now, I will say this machine learning library is actually much better than that one. But if you're in a pinch and you don't really feel like doing a lot of in-engine stuff, I highly recommend that. But yeah, honestly, webcam post estimation is really, really fantastic. I cannot give it enough kudos. And yeah, so essentially, as you can see in the GIF, you just you just essentially record your motion, hit record, you put it in a blender, it just works. It also works in Motion Builder. That the scaling will be a little off, but you just gotta scale it up by 100 or something. But yeah, so here I already did the work for you. You can just use it right here. Get all the motions you ever need for all your projects. But also, this technique works in 2D. TensorFlow's PoseNet and Face Mesh can control SVG rigs. So if you have some vector art for characters, you can actually do little virtual avatars. I think this is how actually those VTubers do their thing. So you can have anime girls or whatever. I mean, it's sky's the limit here. And this is great. This works in JS, so it's pretty impressive. But this is all free to use, which is fantastic. And if you think about it even further, mocap is basically 3D rotoscoping. Rotoscoping is a process where you trace video and then essentially create animation from that. So if you think about mocap in that similar sense of, you kind of figure out where things are, but then you sort of have to tell the computer where they are and confirm that. You can think about deepfakes as a type of motion capture, because technically it is tracking your face and the face mesh. And really, you're just feeding it a video that gives it landmarks and drives motion with. But then, and this is sort of what that looks like. I did this. This is I don't know if you know this meme, but essentially it's the deepfake. I'll just share it with you. It's from Yakuza. So this is nightmare fuel, but that's only because I gave it one photo. Imagine if I had given it 5, or even, if I give it 75 photos, it actually might be really good. And you might have a hard time differentiating it from actual, real video. And so, I think, the same thing, goes. What if you fed it, instead of, a photo of someone, if you fed it just an illustration of someone? And I think this is how you can get into, some really interesting video stylization. Hi there, I'm Stephen Harmon, and I'm thankful to be an ESA Foundation scholar. So again, this is not the cleanest, but I only gave it 3 illustrations. And so think about that for a second. If you, animated a sequence and you just drew the keyframes in terms of 2D animation hand-drawn, and then, you then, use this machine learning to fill in the blanks and the in-betweens, that would save you so much time in animation. It's insane. What normally would have been, taking, days to animate could take literally an hour or so. And you just need some cleanup. And I think the more data you give it, this style was a little ambitious, but if it's a more of a painterly style with more things to hold on to in terms of tracking, it would be way better. And so I think you can imagine just a game where you do all this bright art by just videotaping yourself doing the kicks and the punches and stuff, and then use this to then draw trace over it, draw one frame of that for that video, and then just put it through the system, and then you get some amazing animation for it. I think a game with that would be really interesting to look at. Okay. And then, taking this a step further, it doesn't just have to be humanoid rigs that you're controlling. You can control non-humanoid rigs with post-estimation. Just animate the body normally, and then you can create a mask for the parts that you want to control. And then just you could either control it directly, or you could kind of be a little, sleazy with it, like I did, and be lazy and just like, okay, I'm gonna find the difference between two positions, your left hand and your right hand, and then I'm going to, essentially have that affect, the jaw rotation, as if it was like a 0 to 1 sort of, like, I guess, float or whatever. I mean, it's really kind of really simple, but it works super well. And you can just have blinks be like on a timer. You could be really lazy about it and still get some really nice results. Yeah, this is how I controlled a crocodile to serenade one of my friends. Um, and honestly, if you're camera shy, you don't like acting in front of a webcam or using your phone to do so, that's okay. If you got a VR headset, it actually could be better. Like, honestly, the perk of VR motion capture is you get hands, which is something that usually in traditional motion capture you still have to do by hand or using gloves that may not be that well fitted for the actor, or you have to. They might be out of sync of the actual animation since you're recording them separately using different systems. There's a lot of fuss with hands, but if you're just doing it all in one with a virtual reality IK avatar, then it's pretty basic gestures, right? Like you got finger guns, you got hand open, hand closed. It kind of blends in between pointing, thumbs up, fists, open palms. But like that's all you really need if you think about it. And then you can clean it up later in post. But like that's pretty much all you need. And a step further, if you use the Quest, you have perfect hand tracking. I mean, obviously you can't put your hands over your hands like this because it will occlude it. But like for the most part, you got actual finger articulation. So it's kind of amazing. And what inverse kinematics is essentially there's two different types of animation. There's forward kinematics, which is essentially what you probably know, which is you got joints that move sort of on their own axes, and then they sort of have their own pivots, right? But whereas to inverse kinematics, it essentially has this one object like the hand, drive the rest of the body and take it with it. And then sort of like do the guess estimation of where the elbow is, or like where the legs are in terms of like let's say you have a walk cycle, but you want the character to like have actual foot collision with the floor. Like maybe the floor is raised or there's stairs or whatever. It'll do that proper setting of the foot. But yeah, and not to mention, you can also do really convincing motion virtual camera work by just creating a grabbable object using like whether it be the tools that you get when you're working with the Oculus, or like the Oculus SDK, or even Steam VR. Like there's a grabbable script on there somewhere, like OVR grabbable or whatever, and you can just put it on there and literally just record like an actual camera. And if you want, you could actually slow it down and dampen it a little bit to make it smooth. But yeah, you could easily record camera movement that way. And then using this package, which the link should be going in the chat right now, but this Unity Store package, scene motion capture, it literally just, you could choose what you want to capture and then have that recording event capture when something happens in script, or you can just press start in the editor. Either way, you can capture that motion really easily and get some convincing motion capture. And then using this plugin over here, you could essentially, well, this is for the BVH, but there's another one somewhere in the presentation that lets it export into like a FBX, which means you can actually then go back into Maya and actually see that camera motion, which is fantastic. But let's say you don't want to, go through the hassle of watching literally just like 45 minutes worth of tutorials. You could just buy it. I think the best one out there currently is called Glycon VR. If you wanted to get like the entire package, I think it's somewhere around $100. But I think these two options are just fine as well. And you have everything you want from a VR mocap tool in that package. It's been being developed for like I think over 2 years now, so it's pretty far along. And then there's Open VR Tracker if you're more of just a Blender person and you're not really interested in real time. You can just do that through Blender. And then there's Flipside Studio. I haven't tried it out, but one of my friends has, and they have some pretty cool things on it. So yeah, I mean, there's different programs out there that do all this already, so you didn't have to even write it yourself. Though I think there is a lot of perks of being able to just, be inside of your own project in Editor. But yeah, in terms of face capture, so iPhone, I don't have an iPhone, so I haven't been able to try this myself. But if you have a new iPhone with a nice depth camera, you can use these, programs such as face cap or even Unreal's like Live Link facial capture, and it's pretty robust. It kind of uses like a when Apple bought Face Shift, they kind of took all of their face capture code and then refitted it for their depth camera, and so it's really production quality level facial capture. Now it's not as good as like a it is real time, so it's not as the difference is you're gonna miss out on like asymmetrical details, right? So like let's say the left side of your lip quivers instead of your right, it's just gonna look symmetrical. Like this guy, his lip is like this, but you're just gonna have a very symmetrical looking face instead of that like nice puffy of the cheeks and stuff. Like you're not gonna have exactly what it is, but it's good enough. And so yeah, like literally just get a cheap bike helmet. I think in total cost it costs like $35. Some zip ties, a selfie stick, some duct tape to keep it all in place up here, and then a counterweight for your back, which you can just be like a coin roll, some more zip ties, and that really gets a nice head rig that is pretty much just as good as what you're gonna get here, which probably costs like $1,000 plus. But yeah, and honestly, like what I would use if you're really going for quality is a trial of Faceware. They like have student trials out there, and they don't mind you using it for like non-commercial stuff, I think. And it's really great. Faceware is like the best of the best. I mean, there's dynamic X, Y, and Z or whatever, but Faceware really is super easy to use. Like the retargeter to the analyzer, you just give it some points along the contours of your face. And then it basically like figures out a model. You can kind of let it do its thing, give it more data, and then it'll kind of figure out where things are better. And after retraining and training over and over again, you'll get a pretty good results in terms of a track. And then from there on, you can just retarget it onto whatever rig you want in Maya. It's that easy. And so as you can get here, like I did that little like lip thing. It has that perfectly. Like it's not, it's night and day. So I think, real time is great, but if you have time, just do it in Faceware. Or there is actually an open source alternative that's free coming out called Strong Track that I think is really showing a lot of promise. And I think it might even get an Epic grant sooner or later. But yeah, I think this is something to watch. Just keep in mind, it's called Strong Track. Super neat. But yeah, I mean, iPhone capture is great. But if you're just doing something cartoony and you can't have an iPhone, or all you really need is a mic. You can just get the loudness, the amplitude of the volume, and then I can control the mouth, eyebrows, any other sort of shapes, and then you can just have random blinks. Like literally, here is the code, and it'll be available later after the talk because you can just watch the recording. But yeah, like literally, you can just get this in real time, or even like just get the audio source and like just drop in an actual voiceover clip later. But it's really simple. In fact, you can just Google how to do it. It's not that hard. And here's that in action.
It's me, Tiny Businessman. Want to wish you a happy birthday, but most of all, I want to thank you for the greatest gift of all, putting my competitors out of business.
So, as you can see, like I controlled not only the mouth, but I also controlled the brows. So the eyebrows were sort of a more adapted version of the mouth, because the bland shape is just 0 to 1. It's sort of a range based off of 0. It'll be closed. 1, it'll be open. And you can kind of slide, like it's like a slider. You can kind of slide it up and down. And based off of the volume, that controls the up and down. And so that's what I'm doing here. And then I'm using lerp to make it smooth, and then I'm clamping it to make it not be like on super loud spikes. It'll like go way past the main point. And then I'm just dampening it a little bit, and making it a little bit more subtle for the eyebrows. So when it's really loud or he's really excited, he'll be like, haha, his eyebrows will get a little higher. And with that same approach, that's actually what Cyberpunk is doing for all of their facial animation. Now, there's a great talk. I recommend you just like Google that, Jolly Driven Facial Expression. Because they talk about exactly how they influence each, part of your face, and like with the emotion, and emotionally how that sort of factors in. And it's really great talk. I recommend watching it. But yeah, there's great like Lipsync packages like Lipsync Pro that turn your voiceover waveform into a spectrogram, which is another way of looking at sound, as opposed to a waveform. And it highlights all the phonemes. So, like that's plosives like P, v, m, like da, ta, n, l, all these different mouth shapes that you would have to create, shape keys, blend shapes with your models. It can just trigger those based off of when it happens in the audio clip. And then based off of that, you can sort of combine it with their, own setup of like, they have like emotional controllers. But you can also just sort of write your own based off of this talk, which I'm actually probably going to do later this year because it's super neat. It's already been done. And for more cartoony looks, if you wanted to, you could just draw like sprites of those face shapes, those mouth shapes, like I did here. And then based off of those, you can sort of like swap the sprites in and out using like an array of sprites. And it's pretty convincing, honestly. And that's actually what I'm trying to think of the game, but it was one of Squanch Tendo's games or Squanch games. It's Crow's. I'm trying to think of what it's called. Accounting VR. All of the facial animation that's like Rick and Morty styled, but in 3D, was all done using this technique. In fact, it was actually done using this system specifically, and I've used it. It's all right. Honestly, there is actually like other alternatives that are free, like Pocket Sphinx and other things. So look into those too. But yeah, so I talked about a lot and I covered a lot, but I just wanted to go through it all, and then we can go in the nitty gritty about it. But if you also just want to like hit me up over email, there's my site, and here's my Twitter. I asked Stephen J. Harmon 1. I usually post a lot of interesting things I'm doing. But yeah, that is it. Now, I guess time for questions. So, questions. Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself. Like, there's no line or cue. Can you unmute yourself? Can someone try unmuting themselves?
Yeah, we can unmute ourselves.
Cool.
Works.
I know I went kind of fast. Or maybe not. Jesus, it's 38 after. But yeah, any questions about like anything?
Okay, I'm going to ask then.
Yeah, no, Xavier, go for it. I don't know. Like at this point, I'm just assuming you already knew about all the things I mentioned, and then this is just all old hat.
I just want to ask you how long it will be this journey of learning about mocap.
Like DIY mocap or just like mocap in general? Because I've in general, I think I've been doing mocap for like a year, maybe longer. I don't know. It's all a blur. Time is irrelevant. No, I think like I've been doing it for about a year. I took John's class, which is it's in an animation department, and it's a grad level course. It's really hard to get if you're undergrad, but if you bug Colin enough about it, you could probably get in. And yeah, I took John's mocap class, and then from there, I did some work at House of Moves, where I learned a lot more, and then I obviously learned way more at Activision, and I learned a lot from Deirdre. And so, yeah, like I think in general, it's just been like a, something I'm interested in.
Hey Steven, I have a question. First of all, awesome talk. I have a question, for the real-time mocap. Like, say, like you wanted to make a multiplayer game. Could you have like mocap used in real time for like a multiplayer?
Yeah, you can just use it like a Connect. Same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the only thing I will say about that one package that I mentioned is if you're not using like the executable that I made, if you just download it and try to use it out of the box, there is a major issue with it, and that is they left a memory leak, a GPU resource leak. So meaning it will literally shut down your computer and crash your computer, like blue screen it after like 15 minutes of use or something like that, and I had to fix it myself. And then, kind of do some other things to it to make it actually work decently. But yeah, I mean, I think in general, you could use that as long as you sort of figure out how to like fix the like any of the issues that you find with it. But like, yeah, I mean, honestly, it's just another form of control, like a Kinect would be. Without the Kinect, you just use a webcam. You can also do it with just a video. You don't have to use your webcam input. You could just use like an actual MP4 that you just drag in and substitute, which is actually better. You want it to be as high frame rate as possible. So.
How do you deal, Steven, when you do use Kinect inside Unity with the jittery stuff? Because the final result with Kinect is always jittery, kind of like.
Yeah, I mean, I think jitter you can kind of get I mean, if you're working in Blender, you can just like smooth out keyframes really easily. But and that's usually where I clean up like my messy data nowadays. In terms of like if I'm cleaning out noise, I use Blender because you can just like smooth out the keyframes. But then if I'm making offsets or like retargeting, I like to use Motion Builder because it's just like that's what it's made for. But actually, I will say Blender is catching up to Motion Builder. Rococo has this great add-on that lets you retarget stuff really easily. So Rococo has some dope shit they're working on. That doesn't. You don't even need to like use Rococo suits. You could just use their retargeting add-on. And Blender is completely free, which is like great. But yeah, noise is usually something that you live with, or if you're really caring about it, then you just bring it in a Blender and smooth over the curves. Yeah, like an Adobe Sheet editor. Yeah. Okay, so I actually got a question from Kay Zhao. So Mike refuses to work, but are there any videos you would recommend to complete beginner getting in a mocap? Oh, there's so many. I say like of the things that have been linked on here, look into, rewatch this video, and literally anything I like talked about, just like Google it. But yeah, I realize like in terms of mocap, like unless you're using these sort of like techniques, you have to have a stage, right? You have to have a suit, you have to have the equipment. And there's no real use learning that if you don't have access to that really expensive software that's really hard to get otherwise. So, and a lot of their documentation and shit is outdated, as Deirdre and I can attest to. Or like, it's just not there. And so, as shitty as it is, it's one of those things you kind of have to learn on the job. Like, you have to have access to it to actually do anything with it. But yeah, I mean, you're just right. You have to be a problem solver, and sort of like stumble through things. Like there is some good video resources out there that like teach partially like different parts of the pipeline, but then they might teach some things wrong, or like, so I would say so far everything I've seen on YouTube, nothing does it quite justice to what Deirdre and I learned this summer. But like if you, I don't know, if you're really interested, like I don't know if I show in my presentation, that I had a picture of a friend of mine doing makeup for me. Like I'll take you on as like a protege, and like if I'm doing a mocap shoot, and I can get someone to like come or whatever, you could come with me and just like shadow, and I'll explain things, or like I'll like sit down with you one day and like show you the ropes of literally any of the mocap programs. Like that's my own offer to you, is just like if you really want to learn, just like DM me. Like I'm not scary. maybe buy me lunch, but like like that's I'm not. Yeah, happy to teach.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you so much for doing this. So I'm a production major, so I got interested in mocap because all productions were shut down this year, and I got really interested in virtual production. So I was thinking like, if we can do mocap and virtual production, we can continue shooting stuff in quarantine. So like,
Yeah, totally. That's yeah. No green screens, no sea of greens, just mocap.
yeah, I was thinking like, can you talk a little bit about the combination and the, I guess just the future of at-home virtual production and mocap?
Yeah. So I mean, I think virtual production is. I think what USC gets wrong about it is like I heard like USC has a virtual production class, but it's just like virtual production is with your phone, like at home. Like that's not virtual production over Zoom. Virtual production is just like actually like it's more of along the lines of like previs, like pre-visualization, being able to show a director or a DP what the final product will look like in real time without green screens, without really and that's why I think all these like LCD screen like setups that you see like on the Mandalorian and all that shit, that's why that's becoming so popular, is because they can just get what they want in a very close space without having to go to location. That's what virtual production is. They can make creative decisions on the fly and be like, actually, I want the scene to be on nighttime, and then literally rotate the sun, like, and then they got the lighting they want. And so, yeah, I think. See Eric, if you haven't already gone. Okay. But yeah, I think in terms of virtual production, like, there's some actually great. I'm gonna actually pull it up right now. Let me share screens again. Ah. Let me find virtual camera Unreal. There's this guy who has this channel. It's like a treasure trove of here it is.
So I've hooked up the Vive tracker.
So cinematography database. This guy, I forget his name. I really shouldn't, but he has so many tutorials on how to do virtual production. In terms of like actually how to set everything up hardware wise. Software wise, he shares his like Unreal blueprints. He's amazing. So I would highly recommend looking at his stuff. He does have actually his own program called Cinetracer, but he does have Unreal tutorials that are just Unreal. So that's probably the best place to start as a production person. And I think Unreal is really helpful at being a really useful tool for virtual production. But mainly, yeah, I think like Unreal is really good for like producer people. I think the scripting is more visual. It's node-based, drag and drop. So it's pretty easy to learn. And you get all the models you ever want using like the like I forgot what it's called, but Megascans, like Quixel Megascan library. It's like you have this library of like really photorealistic assets that you could just use for like creating your scenes. So yeah, like anything is, you're literally, the sky's the limit. Your imagination is your limit. You could literally make any scene you want using art that isn't even yours. It's just free with Unreal. And then, do your motions with that program I made, and then just like bring them in using Live Link or something, or just dragging them into the project. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm doing a virtual production right now for class. And I'm doing like some camera work in Unity using their like in beta tools that I can't show in this because it's in beta. So I can't show you all it, but it's really neat. In fact, actually, I will share one thing though with camera. Let me. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screens one more time because I think this is the most important thing for virtual production. It's just really good camera work. And I wrote a book a long time ago. Feel free to read it if you want sometime. I'll drop a link in the chat. But if I go down to the game trailer part of the thing, I'm sorry, this is the big book. Here it is. I talk about how you can make yourself a really nice virtual camera. And you can use a gamepad because you have that sort of movement like range instead of just like keys that are just 0 or 1. You have that like nice like range, so you can sort of ease in and out. And this could be like your dolly controller. This could be your sort of camera rig controller. And it's really nice to be able to place the camera however you want, change things like the focal length, slow-mo, like what type of camera lens you're using, anything really, like the speed of the actual whatever is happening on screen, the sensitivity of the actual like controls. You could change all of that using like the D-pad or something, and like it's really easy to script a nice and there's people who've already done it for you like on the asset store, so look into that. But yeah, I'd say gamepads are super helpful if you want to like get some nice cinematic shots. Okay. Any other questions?
I had a question. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. And I'll drop the book. I'm sorry. I'll drop it. I'll drop it like it's hot right now. Okay, so here's the link. It's just scroll down a little bit. It's in Chinese and it's in English. So like you can share it to whoever you want to share it with. It's free. Yes, continue with your question. Was it Sean?
Cool.
That asked a question?
Yes.
Awesome.
I had a question about animation style. So I've never done any mocap stuff, but like it seems like it's really good for like one-to-one realistic feeling animation. But if you're interested in like more stylistic, cartoony type stuff, do you think that it works for that as well? And like, do you approach it any differently? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So, fun fact, like people won't notice the difference. Essentially, you could just like be a little more exaggerated with your acting. Like that's just an acting exercise. And then if you wanted to, you can speed things up, slow things down, remove keyframes, add more frames. Like it's just one of those things that you can kind of tune like in a dope sheet editor with like a little like just dragging something up a little more, dragging it down a little more, deleting some keys to simplify it. One of the tricks I actually like to do is I like have a script that turns on the animation component on and off every like few frames. So it almost appears like the same effect you would get from watching like Spider-Verse, like it animates on twos almost. Just by like turning it on and off the animator component, like toggling it on and off so it plays like very choppy. That's a way to like stylize it instantly. There's a great game that does that called and I am forgetting the name of it, but it's coming out on Xbox and it's super beautiful and it has Japanese breakfast as the damn it, I'm forgetting it. Anyways, I will remember that later. But,
is that one with the cool outlines?
Yeah, like that one. But like that's a stylized thing, right? You could do that with mocap and then just literally just like add that script that I wrote. And I can give that to you later if you want. Just like DM me or something. But like you could literally just like there you go. Like you got that style instantly and you didn't have to even like worry about like changing the animation at all. Like there's so many creative ways around getting stylized stuff from mocap. Like the puppet thing that I had for the alligator, like that's super stylized, but like I got to decide how it controls it and like in what way, what are the limits, how do I, sort of like keep it a little bit more dampened so it's not as intense. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's up to you how you want to tackle it. It's just problem solving at the end of the day. But yeah, I think mocap can easily replace stylized animation. You just got to be really creative about it and a good actor, I guess. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, good tricks. Thank you.
Anyone else? I don't know. Like,
Yeah, I got a question. Sure, I'll go. Why not? You mentioned Blender to smooth out your animations, your mocap animations. Now, let's say I get my hands on some raw motion capture data, but I don't have access to Vicon or Blade or anything to clean up my data. Can I clean it up in Blender?
so it depends on the format you get it. Like if it's in like an HDF or something, or HDR, I'm forgetting the actual file extension. Do you remember the file extension for like Shogun or?
It's like HDF, I think, or like it's a.
Yeah, but either way, like that file format won't open up in anything but their software. Sadly, that's just how it is. It's very proprietary. But like, let's say you get like an FBX or a BVH, then it'll be you could convert it however you want in Blender, just by exporting it out differently. It's really nice that way. Blender is super great. It's like the Swiss Army knife of 3D, and I think like it's gonna replace Maya and all those later. Because I think game engine is gonna be like, we want all the tools in our own engine, so you don't have to go anywhere, and so they'll pay for those things.
Yeah. Deirdre knows this. I'm a Blender user. I hate Maya to that. So, yeah. That's why I was super interested. Like, can I do that in Blender?
Yeah, you can. In fact, look up Rococo's plugin. It's like super dope to do some, offsets and stuff. So
Cool. I'll look into that. Thanks.
anything else? Nope. Maybe. Yeah, iClone is another option. But like you have to pay for iClone. I'm just trying to be like as DIY as possible. Because like I don't want to pay for shit. If I can write it myself, I'll just do that. I don't care if it takes more time. Yeah, iClone is expensive. But I think iClone I think iClone's goal is to like replace Motion Builder because like no one's in that space. Anyhow, any other questions? I don't know. I'm here, until all you leave. So.
Sure. Can I go ask a question?
Oh, so I heard two people. You gotta fight to the death now.
You can go first.
I said fight to the death, not concede. Okay. Well, whoever went first is there. Okay, you could go, Audrey,
Okay,
because
I
no one else is
I
speaking.
don't know who the other person is, so.
They lost their privileges.
All right. So I'm part of one of the clubs at USC, the Trojan Stunt team. So we do a lot of stunt acting, and I was curious about how viable you would think it is to do like cheap mocap for something as like, it's not just basic motions, but there's a lot of like quick detailed motions. We're like punching people, and we also have that occlusion problem as well.
Yeah, so I'd say there's two options that are pretty good. VR obviously does not work in your case because just imagine doing a flip with a VR headset. You just know. But like I will say, Connect is probably your best bet, but you have to have a lot of them. And you have to have
the
them.
4Connect setup?
What?
Do you mean the 4Connect setup you were talking about earlier?
That's for 4D capture. That's actually capturing like the mesh and like the texture data and stuff. All you want to capture is just the actual like skeleton. But it gets more accurate the more cameras you get. And so I'd say, if you have a multiple Connect setup, but then, traditional motion capture, not like video capture, then that could be the best route. And then maybe go rent or try a free trial of Ipisoft. And that's pretty good. But I will say this, it still may be a little like noisy and kind of like slow. I would give a shot for like just videotaping it, but making sure you're in the frame, like your entire body is in the frame, and then making sure you're using a camera that's set to 60 frames per second. Now, I think most Androids nowadays have this option that I've been using. If you go to the camera app and then go to more, and then go to Pro Video, and then go to the little settings icon, and then it says right here, I think it was like a 60 FPS thing.
Yeah, we have a good DSLR already, so I think
Oh,
that should
well,
be more than
you got a DSLR, shit. Okay, you're good. But like, if you you have a DSLR, just set it to 60 frames per second, and make sure your whole body is in the entire viewport of that camera. Do your thing. Make sure most of yourself is visible. Like try to keep your front to as possible. Like find the best angle, but you want your front as in front as possible. And then just like feed it through that Unity library for motion post estimation, because that's actually surprisingly, it handles occlusion way better than you think. Like let's say I just did a little like spin around, it would get it just fine. And it does positioning really well. So I mean, I think if you could just plug that in terms of your video, and let it process, that's fine. But just to make sure that your capture quality is good, do a little T-pose at the beginning. Just T-pose. I can't really do it because I don't have space, but like a T-pose. Kind of like a Jesus on a crucifix, just T-pose. And then at the beginning, like the first 15 seconds, sort of let it like figure out where you are. And then you can do your thing. But like it's pretty easy to use. That's why I advocate so highly for it.
All right, thanks.
So someone else asked a question, but like is too scared to answer.
All right, I'll ask a question then. So like, what are some of your favorite like games that use a lot of motion capture?
I mean, I think literally every game nowadays uses motion capture. So it's just like, what's your favorite game?
All right.
But I will say, from like a technical standpoint,
right.
Recently I played Horizon Zero Dawn, and I think that's a really impressive game because typically, games, use like script motion, and then they have like animation trees that are super messy. For like different states, and then like blend trees for those different states. Like you have your walking animation, your running animation, and you have like the sort of side strafing animations and all of those. And it's kind of like very robotic in terms of how it controls. Like it doesn't control like a natural motion. But then you have like motion matching, which is like The Last of Us, which has all these starts and stops, like super natural. Like it's procedural. But that's using machine learning, and it's really complicated. But Horizon Zero Dawn actually combined two approaches, where it found a hybrid approach between script motion and root motion, and sort of like figured out when to be driving the animation through the script and when to be driving the animation through the animation. And they did that through annotating all their animations in terms of starts and stops. And it's really impressive. And then they weighted it based off of like the environment around you, like raycasts for like the ground, vaulting, all this sort of other things. But like, their age or like how tired your character is, like all these other factors. And so it's a lot of work. But I recommend watching that GDC talk if you're really interested in that. But it might be a little hard to understand. I try to break it down into video I did on my channel, but like, it's an hour-long technical talk. So if you ever just have questions, feel free to ask me, and I'll try to like explain it in like layman's terms.
Cool, thank you.
High five, David.
Steven, how do you have any recommendation, suggestion if you have something that already animated and is already in Unity and it has their own animation, the character, but you just want to add a tool to the character? So you have to go back to and animate it again and change it. Can I do it just in Unity with some kind of controlling the arcade inside Unity with plugins? Do you have any suggestion for that?
So you said add a tool?
Yeah, kind of like a nice simple IK or something. I know that.
Like just like having it like hold a weapon or something?
Kind of like changing the animation that you already have in your character inside Unity.
Well, you can have a mask, like an animation mask, and then have one animation play while you have another animation play, or just instead have a Unity mask. If you're doing this in Unity, right?
Say it again.
Are you doing this in Unity? Like
yes, Unity. Yeah.
So there's animation layers and masks. You could just have a mask and then just be like, I want to control the hand. So I will mask out the hand in the arm or whatever, and then like have an IK script to like reach for the gun or something if it's on the floor or whatever. Super Hot does that really well. Like, let's say he shoots the gun out of an enemy's hand, they'll go and find the next available gun in the environment and go pick it up. So you could do that with scripts. And if you just want to like really like bludgeon and like your own motion into something without having masks, because masks are kind of complicated to set up. Late update, because there's the update function and then there's late update. If you put all of your motion for something in late update, it'll override any animation you have. It may be a little jittery or laggy, but like it's like the hard like I'm just gonna fucking like just like do this like the most brute force method wise possible, but late update you can just like offset everything up in late update. Yeah, so there's late update, which happens after update, and that's the way you can sort of get around that. Or you could do masks, which is the actual way I recommend, but there's tutorials for that on Unity. And if you have questions, like I'm in your class, like so just feel free to ask me.
You're a bishop guy.
Any other questions? Well, if that is all, I will not waste any more of Carrie's time because you probably want to have dinner or something.
I'm gonna be here until until everyone's done, so it's all
so
good.
We're good on the questions. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. It's been great to have you. Thank you for coming.